Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we are going to talk about one of the most dramatic and final moments of World War II. Our story is about April 16, 1945, the day when Adolf Hitler's generals supposedly told him, "This is your last chance to run." This story is about the end of Nazi Germany, the biggest war in human history, and the choices leaders made when everything was falling apart. Let's get into it. 1. Why April 16, 1945 matters. World War II lasted from 1939 to 1945. By April 1945, it was almost over. The Allied forces, the United States, Great Britain, and the Soviet Union had defeated most of Germany's army. On April 16, 1945, Soviet troops began a massive attack on Berlin, the capital city of Nazi Germany, marking the start of the Battle of Berlin. This day was important because it showed that Germany could not win the war. Berlin was surrounded, German defenses were failing, and Hitler was deep underground in his bunker, refusing to accept the truth. 2. The situation in Germany before April 16th. In early 1945, Germany was in trouble. The Allies had invaded Western Europe after D-Day in June 1944. Soviet Union was pushing in from the east. Germany was losing land, soldiers, and hope. By the spring of 1945, American and British forces were pushing into Western Germany. Soviet forces had crossed the Oder River and were moving closer to Berlin. The German army was weaker than ever. Military leaders knew that defeat was near. They could see that their troops were outnumbered and outgunned. Many generals understood that the war could not be won. 3. The Soviet attack begins on April 16th. On April 16, 1945, the Soviet Red Army launched a massive offensive against German defenses east of Berlin. Some sources say the Soviets had more than 2.5 million soldiers, thousands of tanks, and a huge number of artillery weapons ready for this attack. This attack was part of the final effort to take Berlin and end the war. The goal was clear: capture Berlin and force Germany to surrender. The Battle of Berlin would last for weeks, but the Soviet assault on April 16th was its beginning. Berlin was now the target, and the city's fall seemed almost certain. 4. Inside Hitler's bunker, Adolf Hitler was not on the battlefield. Instead, he was deep in a bunker under the Reich Chancellery in Berlin. In early 1945, he had moved into this bunker to command the final defense of Germany. Hitler believed that Germany could still win, or that somehow the war would turn around. But the reality was very different. The Soviet army was closing in from the east. American and British forces were advancing from the west. Berlin was almost surrounded. Many of Hitler's generals and advisors looked at the situation clearly. They saw that the war was over. They realized that continuing to fight would only cause more death and destruction, not just soldiers, but civilians too. According to several accounts, key German officers saw the hopelessness of their situation and urged Hitler to leave Berlin and save what remained of their forces. These officers believed that Hitler should flee and try to negotiate a surrender or survival plan. However, Hitler refused. He would not leave Berlin. 5. The general's warning. There is a powerful story connected to April 16, 1945. It is said that this was the day a group of Hitler's own generals told him, "This is your last chance to run." This warning was about reality. Hitler had lost the war. His leadership was no longer effective. The Allied forces were closing in. The generals knew that staying in Berlin would mean total defeat. Historical records show that many of Hitler's commanders did try to convince him to change strategy or retreat. They saw that German forces were losing on every front. Berlin was about to be attacked by an overwhelming Soviet force. The lives of many German citizens and soldiers hung in the balance. These generals understood that continuing to fight a lost cause would lead to unnecessary suffering. They hoped Hitler might choose to withdraw, save lives, and maybe end the war sooner. But Hitler refused their advice. He chose to stay. And for him, the option to run was not only unthinkable, it was unacceptable. Hitler's decision was shaped by pride, power, and refusal to admit defeat, even when defeat was obvious. 6. Hitler's reaction to the reality. Instead of retreating or surrendering, Hitler did something very different. On April 16th, as the Soviets launched their attack, Hitler issued orders for a last stand. He told his troops to hold their positions at all costs. He told them that anyone who retreated was a traitor. He ordered that Berlin must be defended to the last man. These orders were desperate. The truth was that Germany no longer had enough troops, ammunition, or strength to stop the Soviet attack. There was no real hope of winning. Yet, Hitler refused to accept it. 7. What happened next? The Battle of Berlin. After April 16th, the Battle of Berlin began in earnest. This was one of the bloodiest and final battles in the European part of World War II. Soviet forces pushed into the city from all directions. Urban fighting was brutal, house by house, street by street. Berlin became a battlefield full of destruction and death. German soldiers, many of them very young boys or old men, were ordered to defend the city. Civilians were caught in the crossfire. Many families tried to escape or hide. The suffering was enormous. Meanwhile, inside the bunker, Hitler's situation continued to worsen. His generals saw no chance of victory. Many begged him to surrender or flee, but he would not listen. 8. Hitler's final days and the days after April 16th, things got worse for Hitler. The Soviets moved closer and closer to the bunker. German resistance fell apart. More generals and officers pleaded with Hitler to surrender. By April 20th, Hitler celebrated his birthday and even promoted some young soldiers. But this was not celebration, it was desperation. By April 22nd, Hitler was forced to admit that the war was lost. According to records, he acknowledged defeat to those around him. On April 29th, Hitler married his longtime partner Eva Braun. The very next day, April 30th, 1945, Hitler and Eva Braun committed suicide in the bunker. His death marked the end of Nazi Germany's leadership and the final collapse of the regime he had built. 9. Why this moment matters. April 16, 1945 is remembered because it shows a moment when reality was undeniable. The war was lost. The enemy was at the gates. Yet, Hitler chose pride over reason. This day stands as a symbol of the dangers of blind loyalty to a leader, the tragedy that occurs when leaders refuse to see the truth, how arrogance and denial can lead to suffering for millions. If Hitler had listened to his generals, perhaps fewer people would have died in Berlin and across Germany. History shows us that leaders must sometimes face hard truths and make difficult choices that can save lives or destroy them. 10. The end of the war. After Hitler's death, Berlin finally surrendered on May 2, 1945. Soon after, on May 7th and 8th, Germany officially surrendered to the Allied forces. This day is often called VE Day, Victory in Europe Day, marking the end of World War II in Europe. The war had killed millions of people, soldiers and civilians, and left Europe devastated. But Germany's defeat also meant the end of the Nazi regime and the chance for peace and rebuilding. 11. What we learn from this history. So what can we learn from April 16, 1945? History teaches us that pride and denial can be dangerous. Good leaders listen to wise counsel and accept reality. When people refuse to change course, the cost can be great. The suffering of war affects everyone: soldiers, families, civilians, and future generations. The story of this day reminds us that sometimes even those closest to a leader must speak truth, even when it is difficult. And sometimes leaders must accept it, even when it hurts. Closing thoughts: today's video and learning about April 16, 1945, the day Hitler's generals told him, "This is your last chance to run." Though Hitler did not run, history remembers this moment as the beginning of the end for one of the darkest chapters in human history. If you like this video, please like, subscribe, and leave a comment below. Tell us what part of history you want to learn about next. Thank you for watching.